Klingon zombies on the Enterprise? A wedding in space gone awry? 4 Vulcans and a half? Star Trek Strange New World Season 3 is gearing up to be the wildest ride yet, and you won't believe what the new episode titles reveal. The official list of 10 episode titles just dropped, and each one is a clue to the adventures awaiting Captain Pike's crew. If you're still reeling from last season's cliffhanger, you're not alone. Season 2 left us hanging on the edge of our seats. A Starfleet crew in peril, an enemy at the gates, and our heroes forced to make an impossible choice. After nearly 2 years of waiting, Trekkies are buzzing with theories about how Season 3 will resolve that tension and where the Enterprise is headed next. Will the crew survive the Gorn onslaught? Who or what is lurking in these cryptic new titles? And how on Earth, or any planet for that matter, do Klingon zombies fit into all this? Stay tuned, we're going to break it all down. Welcome back to Hailing Frequencies. In today's episode, we're diving deep into Strange New Worlds Season 3's 10 officially released episode titles, decoding what each might mean for the story. We'll start by recapping the explosive Season 2 finale and then explore how Season 3 might zigzag between intense drama and light-hearted fun, a pattern Strange New Worlds fans know and love. For each of the 10 titles, I'll share my juicy speculation grounded in Star Trek lore, hints from the trailers, yes, including those Klingon zombies and retro vibes, and the literal meanings behind the titles. Along the way, I'll throw in some burning questions and what ifs, and I definitely want to hear your answers in the comments. Ready to hop aboard the Enterprise and peek at the Season 3 roadmap? Hit it. Season 2 cliffhanger first of all, where we left off. So before we decode the new titles, let's set the stage. How did Season 2 end? In a word, cliffhanger. The finale, titled Hegemony, saw Captain Pike and crew tangled in a deadly confrontation with the Gorn, the fierce reptilian species that Strange New Worlds has reimagined as terrifying, fast-breeding monsters. Things went from bad to worse when a Gorn attack on a colony world led to half the Enterprise's landing party, including Mbenga, La'an, Ortegas, and Sam Kirk, being abducted onto a Gorn ship right in front of Pike's eyes. Meanwhile, Starfleet Command ordered Enterprise to withdraw, essentially telling Pike to abandon his people for the greater good.
The greater good.
The final moments showed Gorn ships closing in, Pike's loved ones in enemy hands, and Captain Pike faced with an agonizing dilemma: follow orders and flee, or defy Starfleet to save his crew. Then cut to black. Talk about suspense. Oh, and did I mention the finale slipped in a legendary cameo? Amid the chaos, the crew ran into a resourceful engineer who helped them survive. None other than a young Montgomery Scotty Scott. This surprise introduction of the future Enterprise engineer had fans cheering. But even Scotty's clever tricks couldn't resolve things in time. The episode ended with Pike's final decision unspoken. The Gorn threat unresolved, and viewers shouting "No!" at their screens as the credits rolled. It was Strange New World's first true cliffhanger ending, and it set the table for Season 3's opening act. Now, Season 3 promises to pick up right where we left off. When we reconnect with Pike and the Enterprise crew, they'll be in the thick of the harrowing encounter with the Gorn. The burning questions: how will Pike save his people from the Gorn? What consequences will he face for potentially disobeying orders? And will this conflict change the Federation's stance towards the Gorn going forward? Hang tight, we'll tackle those when we get to Episode's 1 title, which is very telling. But first, let's talk about the bigger picture of Season 3's tone and format. Strange New Worlds has made a name for itself by blending white-knuckle drama with playful throwbacks. One week, you're watching a tense war story or horror homage. The next week, it's a body swap comedy or even a full-blown musical. If you felt some tonal whiplash last season, that was entirely on purpose. In fact, the showrunners have said they model the series after TOS in that it moves through genre fluidly. They know their cast can handle everything from high drama to goofy humour, so they've embraced a wide variety of episode styles. Season 2 really proved that. We had courtroom drama, screwball comedy, an animated crossover, a musical, and gritty war drama, all in 10 episodes. So, what about season 3? Well, it looks like they're dialing that up even more. The official word is that season 3 will dive into thrilling adventures of faith, duty, romance, comedy, and mystery, with genres never before seen in Trek. And if you've seen the teaser footage, you know what they're hinting at. A holodeck murder mystery, a retro 1960s style sci-fi romp, straight up horror elements, classic space battles, and character-centric drama all in one season. In other words, I expect a wild tonal ride, possibly alternating between serious and light episodes as a kind of rhythm. Strange New Worlds tends to give us a breather or a laugh after a heavy episode. Season 2, for example, followed a dark war story, Under the Cloak of War, with a zany musical, Subspace Rhapsody. And it worked. Season 3 might follow a similar pattern. 10 episodes that zigzag from high-stakes intensity to fun and back again, keeping us on our toes. With that in mind, let's look at each of the new episode titles in order. I'll recap what we know, or what we can infer, about each episode and speculate on the storyline, from the climactic Hegemony Part 2 to the intriguingly titled New Life and New Civilizations. There are Klingons, Gorn, Vulcans, and more in the mix, plus some words that hint at time travel and existential questions. Ready? Let's beam down into these titles one by one. So, Episode 1, Hegemony Part 2. Captain Pike, played by Anson Mount, steels himself for battle in Hegemony Part 2. No surprise here, Episode 1 of Season 3 is explicitly the second half of the Season 2 finale, even retaining the title Hegemony. If Part 1 was the setup, Hegemony Part 2 will deliver the payoff. This is our cliffhanger resolution, so expect the episode to pick up immediately with Pike and the Enterprise in that standoff against the Gorn. The word hegemony means dominance or leadership, and in Part 1 it referred to the Gorn's aggressive incursion into Federation space, attempting to establish their dominance. In Part 2, it could take on a new meaning. Perhaps Starfleet reasserting its own authority, or Pike finding a way to break the Gorn's hold over the situation. Story-wise, I predict a thrilling conclusion to last season's Gorn-based cliffhanger. Pike is not the kind of captain who leaves people behind, so I suspect he'll risk it all to rescue his captured crew members. That could mean a daring infiltration of the Gorn ship, or a clever negotiation. We might even see the Enterprise take the fight to the Gorn, finding some way to even the odds rather than running away. Perhaps Starfleet sends reinforcement, or Scotty's technical genius gives them an edge. I mean, wouldn't it be fitting if Scotty's jewelry gadget, whatever that might be, saved the day, establishing his reputation early on? The stakes will be sky high in this episode. Not only are beloved characters' lives on the line, but Pike's integrity as a captain is being tested. Obey orders or save his crew. Classic Starfleet dilemma. I wouldn't be shocked if Pike disobeys the retreat order to do the right thing. A risky move, of course, that could bring its own fallout later in the season. And remember, Strange New Worlds exists in the shadow of TOS lore. In TOS, around 2267, Kirk and the Federation at large aren't very familiar with the Gorn. Kirk famously fights a Gorn captain in Arena. How is Strange New Worlds going to reconcile that? Possibly the outcome of this two-parter will be shrouded in secrecy. Maybe Starfleet covers up the true events or a higher power intervenes. And speaking of higher powers, one wild theory out there, could the Metrons show up? Now, the Metrons were an advanced alien race in TOS Arena who forced Kirk and the Gorn to duel and then stop the fight. If part 2 ends with a stalemate or truce, maybe some entity like the Metrons ensures that the conflict doesn't escalate into full war, which might explain why Kirk's era sees the Gorn more as mysterious monsters at the fringes. Pure speculation, of course, but it's fun to ponder. One thing is for sure, though, Hegemony Part 2 will be action-packed and intense. Expect Gorn carnage, tough decisions, and likely a heroic triumph with a cost. By the end of the episode, the immediate Gorn threat should be resolved, at least for now. Pike will have his fingers back, fingers crossed, but possibly at the expense of something. Maybe a political fallout with Starfleet or a personal toll on the crew. This opener will set the tone. Season 3 is starting with a bang. After this, the crew and we viewers will need a lighter second episode to catch our breath. And guess what? The title of episode 2 suggests exactly that. Wedding Bell Blues. I mean, what a tonal 180, right? After the life or death drama of the premiere, episode 2's title, Wedding Bell Blues, hints at a very different kind of story. The phrase comes from a famous 1960s song about longing and lost love. And it suggests we might be in for a romantic or comedic episode here. Strange New Worlds often likes to follow up a dark episode with something lighter or more personal, and a wedding-themed story sounds like the perfect breather. But in Star Trek, weddings are rarely simple, joyous occasions. More often, they're catalysts for drama, humour, or even disaster. So whose wedding might it be? The title could be metaphorical, but let's take it at face value first. Possibly someone is getting married, or trying to, and encountering some blues or troubles. Could it be an Enterprise crew member tying the knot? We haven't seen any onboard romances heading towards the altar, unless there's a surprise romance that we haven't heard about. It could also be an alien wedding that the crew is involved in. Maybe the Enterprise is hosting a diplomatic wedding between species, with cultural hijinks ensuing. Star Trek has done that kind of thing before. Or perhaps the entire episode is an alternate reality scenario. More on that possibility in a moment. One strong possibility is that this episode centers on Spock's love life. Specifically the fallout of his failed engagements. Spock had a rough time romantically in season 2. He and his Vulcan fiancée T'Pring were on the rocks. They paused their engagement after some very human Vulcan complications. And his budding romance with nurse Christine Chapel also fizzled when Christine left for a prestigious fellowship. At the end of season 2, Spock basically ended up alone, nursing a broken heart on two fronts. Wedding Bell Blues could refer to Spock feeling blue about weddings that won't happen, perhaps reflecting on what might have been with T'Pring, or regretting that he and Chapel didn't work out. The trailer teases that Spock and Chapel's dynamic is not over yet, though. We see hints of more Spock and Chapel romance, for better or for worse, to come. So maybe Christine Chapel returns to the Enterprise by this episode, and there's some awkward reunion amidst a wedding scenario. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that in the trailer scene with Spock and Nurse Chapel in bed, Christine is wearing what looks like an engagement ring. Could that hint that it belongs to this episode? There's also the straightforward interpretation. Maybe T'Pring herself is attempting to move on and have a wedding, but to someone else. Imagine the drama if Spock learns that T'Pring is considering an arranged marriage with another Vulcan because their engagement is on hold. That could certainly give him the blues and force him to confront his feelings. We know eventually, thanks to the original series episode Amok Time, Spock and T'Pring do get married. Could Strange New Worlds be foreshadowing or building towards that, perhaps? Another angle, Wedding Bell Blues could be a comedic romp, where, say, the crew tries to throw a wedding or celebrate one, and everything goes wrong. Think of classic Trek episodes where the best laid plans get comically derailed. In TOS, for example, a wedding ceremony in Balance of Terror is interrupted by a Romulan attack, tragically. In that case, and in Strange New Worlds, maybe it'll be played more for laughs. Or heartfelt moments. Perhaps Captain Pike, ever the Boy Scout, is officiating a crew member's small wedding on board. But chaos intervenes. An alien crisis or something like that. I mean, there are all sorts of ideas there. And speaking of holodecks and alternate scenarios, there's some evidence that early in the season, the crew ends up in a 1960s style setting, with Glimpse Ortegas and Chapel in the 1960s civilian clothing in the trailer. Could Wedding Bell Blues actually be the episode where that happens? The title is literally a 1969 pop song, which fits the 1960s theme. Possibly the crew could be stuck in a simulation or time travel scenario where they're attending a 1960s Earth wedding. It's a bit of a stretch, but with Strange New Worlds, anything is possible. If a powerful being like Trelane, more on him soon, is involved, he might thrust our characters into a mid-20th century roles for his amusement, wedding drama included. Whether literal or metaphorical, I suspect romance and humour are on the menu. This could be a chance for some character development too. For instance, Una, number one, had a brief mention of a lover in season 2. Could she be part of a romance plot? La'an Noonien Singh had unrequited feelings for a certain James T. Kirk last season. Any chance of a surprise wedding bell for her? I mean, okay, that's a long shot given Kirk's destined future, but it's worth a thought. Or it could simply be an ensemble comedic episode where everyone's dealing with romantic shenanigans during a wedding event. No matter what, I expect light-hearted, character-driven storytelling here. Likely a mix of laughs and a touch of emotional awe factor. And if you're a Spock Chapel shipper or rooting for Spock and T'Pring, this might be the episode that addresses those threads directly. Keep an eye out for engagement questions, pun intended, like, will Spock finally admit his true feelings? Can duty and love coexist in Starfleet? By the episode's end, we'll hopefully have resolved the blues, or at least had a fun time singing them. After a possible wacky detour, episode 3's title brings us back to a more straightforward adventure vibe. Shuttle to Kenfory. This one immediately conjures images of a shuttlecraft mission, and in Star Trek lore, whenever a story zooms in on a shuttle trip, you know you're in for some close quarters drama. Kenfory likely refers to a destination, a planet or a colony name, or perhaps a person or place that the shuttle is bound for. The phrasing Shuttle to has a bit of a classic sci-fi feel, akin to titles like Journey to Babel or Assignment Earth. It suggests a journey that might not go as planned. What could happen on the way to Kenfory? Strange New Worlds could be giving us its take on the tried and true shuttle episode. For example, in TOS, the Galileo 7 saw Spock and others stranded when their shuttle crashed on a hostile planet, leading to conflict and survival challenges. In the Next Generation and Voyager, we often had shuttle accidents or detours that forced characters into difficult situations, and great character developments usually ensued. So perhaps Kenfory is a remote outpost or research station the Enterprise crew needs to reach. But a small team takes a shuttle ahead and ends up in trouble. Kenfory itself doesn't ring any bells in established canon, which implies it's a new planet or colony. Maybe it's a Federation colony under threat or the site of a diplomatic mission. Since episode 1 likely wraps the Gorn crisis, episode 3 might start a new standalone story. It could be something like Pike sends a shuttle with Spock, Uhura, and a couple of others on an errand to Kenfory, and along the way they encounter a phenomenon or an enemy. The shuttle could crash or get stranded, cue tension among the crew as they figure out how to survive or fix it, or they could pick up a mysterious passenger en route. The title structure even feels like a nod to old school Trek novels or episodes that in that it has an adventurous ring to it. One very intriguing possibility: could Kenfory be related to Klingons? We know from the trailers that Klingons will feature this season. There's that shot of a Klingon wielding a whip of all things, and mention of a Klingon looking not so healthy. If Kenfory were in or near Klingon space, a routine shuttle ride could turn into a Klingon encounter. Perhaps our crew stumbles into a Klingon ship in distress or a secret outpost. The reason I bring this up is the talk of zombie Klingons in the trailer. A Klingon who appears zombified was glimpsed very briefly, and one theory out there is that a Klingon might be infected with something, even Gorn eggs, yikes, to make them act like a rabid or undead version of themselves. If that's a separate story from the Gorn conflict, maybe it happens here, or in episodes 4 or 9. Imagine episode 3 sees the shuttle answering a distress call. Kenfory could be a Federation post attacked by Klingons or vice versa. The team finds a Klingon warrior acting strangely, almost like a mindless creature. Perhaps a horror element creeps in, maybe a pathogen turning people, Klingon or human, into aggressive zombies. The teaser showed Dr. Mbenga sprinting away from something scary, possibly tying into the same plot. Maybe he's with the shuttle team dealing with an outbreak. If Kenfory was a research base, could they have experimented on something that caused a mini zombie outbreak? This could be Strange New World's chance to do another horror-themed episode, akin to Season 1's Gorn hatchlings in All Those Who Wander. The blog chatter speculates we might get a horror episode with infected Klingons reminiscent of zombies. Shuttle to Kenfory could fit that bill. An isolated, vulnerable shuttle crew facing a terrifying threat in a confined setting. For me, though, the biggest clue of all comes from the name of the location, Kenfory. Although it's not currently known in Star Trek lore, it might be a subtle nod, or not so subtle, to the 1978 zombie movie Dawn of the Dead. That movie's protagonist, Peter, was played by the actor Kenfory. Deliberate reference or wild coincidence? Well, we'll have to wait and see. On the other hand, of course, it might simply be a classic adventure mystery. The word Kenfory could be an anagram or reference to something. Some fans love to play those games, but personally, I haven't spotted anything obvious other than the Dawn of the Dead connection. It sounds like an alien name or place. Maybe the shuttle is transporting an alien dignitary to Kenfory and things go haywire, or it's a race against time to get somewhere, like delivering medicine or something like that, and the shuttle crew have to overcome internal conflict or sabotage. One more idea: character focus. Shuttle episodes often pair up characters to spark interactions. We might see, say, Spock and Laan stuck together, an odd duo that could be fun. Or Uhura and Pelia. Pelia is the centuries-old engineer introduced in Season 2. Imagine her in a tense situation with a younger crew member. Wisdom versus impulsiveness, that sort of thing. The title alone doesn't tell us who's involved, but one of the trailer images shows Spock in a shuttle. So he's likely key in this one. Perhaps Spock is leading the shuttle mission. I mean, in Galileo 7, Spock led a doomed shuttle mission, so this could be an homage. Tone-wise, I suspect moderate seriousness here. An adventure with possibly a suspenseful twist. If episode 2 was light, episode 3 might tilt back to tense. Will everyone make it to Kenfory in one piece? What secrets await them at the destination? The answers will set the stage for the next very unusual sounding episode, A Space Adventure Hour. Now, this title just screams fun and nostalgia. A Space Adventure Hour sounds like something straight out of the 1940s or 1950s, like an old-time radio serial or a cheesy early sci-fi TV show. And guess what? That is almost certainly on purpose. The Season 3 teaser material strongly suggests that one episode might have a throwback retro sci-fi aesthetic, deliberately mimicking the style of classic pulp adventures. I'm willing to bet A Space Adventure Hour is that episode. So what do we know? The trailer showed the Enterprise crew in some very unusual get-ups on what appeared to be a retro-futuristic set. Specifically, there's an image of Ortegas and Captain Kirk wearing 20th century style civilian clothes on what looks like an old-fashioned spaceship bridge. We see later on rotary telephones installed on the Enterprise and analog dials. We see a number of the crew with 1960s hairdos and outfits like they walked off the set of Mad Men or TOS's Piece of the Action. It's clear the show is doing a loving parody or homage to retro sci-fi. One commentator said the vibe is similar to Voyager's Captain Proton holodeck adventures, black and white serials with melodramatic villains. The title, A Space Adventure Hour, fits that perfectly, like the name of a campy sci-fi anthology program. So what's the in-universe explanation? How on earth are Pike's crew in a mid-20th century style sci-fi scenario? The big clue is the mention of a holodeck. Yes, a holodeck in the 23rd century. The trailer raised eyebrows by showing that Strange New Worlds will feature a holodeck-like story, even though holodecks weren't a thing in TOS, although they were in the animated series. There's speculation that the crew might encounter some early prototype holotechnology, or perhaps an alien equivalent that creates illusions. It might also not strictly be a holodeck. It could be an alien-induced fantasy, like in TOS The Cage or Shore Leave, where advanced beings made the crew see illusions. However, multiple sources explicitly mention a holodeck murder mystery going on. Here's a likely scenario. The Enterprise crew either voluntarily enter a holographic simulation for recreation or get sucked into one against their will. And the simulation is a tongue-in-cheek retro adventure program. Possibly one of the crew, maybe an enthusiast of old sci-fi, could be Ortegas or even an admiral, has a program called A Space Adventure Hour that emulates vintage space hero stories. Maybe things go wrong, as holodeck stories often do, and they get trapped in it, having to play out the narrative to escape. The mention of a murder mystery element means the plot inside the simulation could involve solving a crime on a retro spaceship. With our crew playing detective, damsel, villain, etc. I mean, how fun does that sound? And we cannot ignore the biggest wild card, Trelane. Yes, the trailer all but confirmed that comedian Rhys Darby is appearing as the classic TOS character Trelane, the mischievous, godlike alien who loves to toy with humans from the Squire of Gothos. In the trailer, Darby's character is seen in a Victorian-era coat with dramatic sideburns, snapping his fingers to seemingly alter reality. That outfit is totally Trelane style. Trelane is basically a precursor to Q, an impish being with vast powers who, in the original series, trapped Kirk and crew in a pseudo-18th century game. If he's back, and it looks like he is, it would make sense for him to be behind this whole Space Adventure Hour shenanigan. Perhaps Trelane plucks the Enterprise into one of his games, deciding he wants to play Space Hero, this time using the crew as his cast. He could be the one outfitting the ship with phones and retro decor, forcing our heroes to act out roles. One split second in the teaser even looked like Trelane snapping reality into possibly a different form, which fits perfectly here. So picture this. One moment Pike and friends are on the rail bridge, the next, snap, they find themselves on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, reimagined as if it were a 1960s TV set. Wood panel consoles, corded phones, and maybe a cheesy narrator voice announcing, "Tonight's episode, a space adventure hour." It's zany, it's meta, and it's absolutely something Strange New Worlds would dare to do. The crew likely have to play along, perhaps adopting pulpish personas. The gallant captain, the femme fatale, the mad scientist, that sort of thing, to unravel the plot and satisfy Trelane or the holodeck's parameters. Along the way, expect Easter eggs galore. The fact that Kirk, Paul Wesley, is present in the promotional still in the trailer suggests he's part of this story. Maybe Kirk gets swept into the simulation too, giving us another fun pre-TOS Kirk appearance. Kirk in a turtleneck and leather jacket looking like a 20th century action hero? Yes, please. There might be nods to classic Trek. The description mentioned it's Star Trek aping retro sci-fi, so perhaps they'll parody themselves a bit. Like how Voyager's Captain Proton parodied Flash Gordon, which in turn inspired Star Trek. The tone will be campy, comedic, and visually distinct. This is likely Season 3's big genre experiment episode, much like Season 2's animated crossover or the musical. It will also be a love letter to the roots of sci-fi. The writers know longtime fans will grin at the sight of deliberately old-fashioned Starfleet scenario, and newcomers will just enjoy the sheer creativity and humour. I expect plenty of laughs, but also some character moments. Often, these holodeck-style episodes let characters reveal new facets. Someone might get really into their alter ego, for instance. The key question, how do they get out? Likely by outsmarting the simulation or convincing Trelane or whoever to stop. Perhaps Pike shows Trelane what true heroism is, or someone like Una exploits a loophole in the story. We might get a poignant or teaching moment when the fun and games wrap up. Trelane in TOS learned a lesson when his parents scolded him like a child. Maybe here the crew's unity shows him something new. All in all, a space adventure hour is poised to be off-the-wall comedic highlight of the season. If you love episodes where Trek doesn't take itself too seriously, this is going to be your jam. Don't forget to comment if you catch any vintage sci-fi references during this one. I know I'm going to be looking. On to episode 5 then, Through the Lens of Time. After that likely romp, episode 5's title brings us back to a grander, more poetic tone. Through the Lens of Time, this one practically shouts time travel or temporal shenanigans. Star Trek has a long love affair with time-bending episodes, and Strange New Worlds is due for another, given how well last season's time travel episode, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, was received. The phrasing, lens of time, suggests viewing something through time, possibly seeing the past or future through some device or phenomenon. It could also imply that an episode spans different time periods, examining something across decades or centuries. One interpretation is that the crew might encounter a time portal or artifact that allows them to witness or even step into another era. Think The Guardian of Forever from TOS, the city on the edge of forever, that was literally a portal showing images of history. Lens makes me think of a viewer or filter. Maybe an alien relic on a planet acts as a lens into the past. The Enterprise could be studying ruins of an ancient civilization and find a device that replays historical events or even projects the crew's consciousness back into time briefly. Alternatively, perhaps someone's memories serve as the lens. We could see flashbacks through the eyes of a character, reliving an earlier time. Pelia, the engineer, is centuries old. Could she be key here with her long perspective? Another angle, this could be a future-focused episode. Could the lens of time mean someone glimpses the future? Captain Pike, quite notably, already has knowledge of his personal future. He knows that he'll suffer a horrible accident years from now. Not that many years from now, I think about 2 years from now, thanks to a time crystal in Discovery. Now, that knowledge has been a quiet burden for him. An episode about time could circle back to Pike's fate, or even have him confront new visions of the future. Perhaps the lens is metaphorical, an exploration of how looking through time changes one's decisions. Pike might get a reminder or update about his destiny. Imagine if he saw a possible future of the Enterprise under Kirk, reinforcing that legacy theme, like we saw in Season 2. Given the mid-season placement, Episode 5 might also be where the season's larger arc comes into focus. Remember, Star Trek.com's description teased a villain that will test our character's grit beyond the Gorn. That villain hasn't appeared yet in our discussion. Possibly the villain is introduced around this point. Through the lens of time could involve a villain with a temporal angle. Maybe someone manipulating time or trying to change history. Star Trek villains with time agendas aren't unheard of. Think Arn Darwin or in DS9's Trials and Tribulations, or the temporal Cold War in Enterprise. If not a literal time traveller, the villain could be someone who forces our crew to reckon with past actions, possibly their own. However, it might simply be a standalone high-concept episode. Every Strange New World season has a few big sci-fi concept episodes. Season 1 had the fantasy book world and the comet with music. Season 2 had the time travel romance and the crossover. A time travel or time loop story would fit perfectly here. The phrase lens of time also evokes possibly a time loop scenario like TNG's Cause and Effect or Discovery's Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, where characters see events repeat and have to act differently each loop. Perhaps they literally see a replay, like viewing through a lens of their previous attempts. Star Trek lore offers lots to draw from. Maybe the crew meets someone out of time. There was a TOS episode, Wink of an Eye, about hyper-accelerated time, or TNG's Timescape with time bubbles. If Strange New Worlds wanted to nod to those, the lens could be a field that slows or speeds up time. Emotional stakes could be high here too. These episodes often force characters to confront regrets or hopes. Could La'an, who experienced an alternate timeline with Kirk last season, get a moment to peek through the lens at what might have been? I mean, she still holds feelings from that erased timeline, which is tragic and ripe for a revisit. Or could Uhura get a message from her deceased family through time? I'm just brainstorming ways to tug heartstrings here. One more thought. This might tie into the larger Trek universe or foreshadowing. Sometimes Strange New Worlds sets up original series elements. Perhaps Through the Lens of Time could reference something that connects to TOS or even another series, a cameo from a legacy character via time travel. I mean, a wild idea. What if someone saw Jim Kirk's future through the lens? Maybe a nod to his eventual fate. That might be too far out, but hey, who knows? In summary, Through the Lens of Time sounds like our Mindbender episode. You can expect a mix of philosophical and emotional storytelling with some cool temporal effects. This might be one of those episodes we finish and go, oh, I need a minute to process what that means. And after a heavy concept like this, naturally, Strange New Worlds is likely to lighten the mood next, which brings us to perhaps the quirkiest title of the bunch. Episode 6, The Sailor Who Ate His Tail. All right, take a moment to appreciate how delightfully bizarre this title is. The Sailor Who Ate Its Tail. I mean, what on Earth, or Vulcan for that matter, does that mean? For those not steeped in Trek lore, a Saylat is a creature from Vulcan, essentially a big bear-like pet with fangs that Vulcan children sometimes keep. Spock had a pet Saylat named Ichaya when he was young, as seen in the animated series. So a Saylat is basically a Vulcan teddy bear, but as Spock once dryly noted, on Vulcan the teddy bears are alive and they have 6-inch fangs. Now, a Saylat eating its tail brings to mind the image of an animal chasing or consuming its own tail, a bit like the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, a snake eating its tail, symbolizing a cycle or self-perpetuation. This title has the cadence of a fable or fairy tale. It reminds me of children's story titles, or maybe a metaphorical Vulcan saying, perhaps akin to a dog chasing its own tail in human idiom, but more dramatic. It suggests some sort of loop or self-destructive cycle. Given that episode 6 comes after a likely heavy time episode, this one could be lighter or at least quirky. It might be a Vulcan-focused story considering the Saylat reference. Maybe we'll venture to Vulcan or deal with Vulcan culture again here. Alternatively, it might be metaphorical and no literal Saylats appear. Let's explore a few possibilities. The first one, a Vulcan folk tale brought to life. Perhaps the crew encounters a situation that mirrors a Vulcan myth or parable called the Saylat who ate its tail. This could be something like a holodeck or dream sequence where a story is literally played out, similar to how Season 1's The Elysian Kingdom brought a children's book to life on the ship. Imagine an alien entity that forces the crew to act out a morality tale. If they haven't exhausted the characters become fairy tale figures trope, having done it once already, they could do a Vulcan spin on it. A Saylat devouring its tail could symbolize a cautionary tale about greed or endless revenge. I'm just speculating on what Vulcan lesson that might impart. Perhaps the Saylat that harms itself by indulging instinct. Possibility number 2, that it's a time loop or causal paradox episode. Funnily enough, the Ouroboros imagery ties back to time loops, which we just talked about for episode 5. Could it be that episode 6 continues a timey-wimey theme? Perhaps this is the actual time loop episode. The phrase ate its tail, a loop closing in on itself. Maybe the Enterprise gets stuck in a loop, repeating events like the snake eating its tail endlessly. The Saylat could be a code name for Starfleet operation or some experiment that backfires, causing the loop. Or maybe a Vulcan science ship named Saylat. That might be a little far-fetched, but Starfleet ships have odd names sometimes. If this were the case, the title is a poetic way to hint at the loop. Possibility 3, a character metaphor, a dilemma for Spock. A Vulcan Saylat chasing its tail could be a metaphor for someone stuck in a futile pursuit, and Spock comes to mind for that. At this point in the season, he may still be wrestling with his human versus Vulcan nature, feeling like he's going in circles with his emotions. The Saylat who ate its tail might be a whimsical way to describe Spock if he's caught in self-destructive behavior, like suppressing his feelings only for them to bite him. For example, if Christine Chapel returned and then leaves again, Spock might be left hurt and blaming his human half, a cycle he's been through before. This could be an episode where Spock learns a lesson, maybe via an allegory or advice from someone like his father, Sarek, or a mentor. Purely theoretical, but the title does have a bit of a lesson vibe. Possibility number 4, comedy and chaos. Let's not discount that this could be a fairly comic episode. The wording is almost Monty Python-esque. I can imagine the crew dealing with a literal alien creature, maybe a real Saylat or another creature analogous to it, that's running amok on the ship on an away mission. Perhaps someone brings a pet aboard. Pike, did you adopt a Saylat cub without telling Starfleet? And it causes comedic trouble. A Saylat eating its tail could be a silly sight gag as well. Season 3 is said to include romance, comedy, and mystery, and this might be one of the comedy hours, depending on how it's executed. The episode numbering might be a clue. Episode 6 in prior seasons often had emotional beats. Season 1's episode 6 was dramatic. Season 2 episode 6 was spooky. If they are alternating, episode 6 could lean comedic, since episode 5 might be serious. There's also the matter of guest stars. Uzo Aduba from Orange is the New Black is reported to guest this season. Could she appear in a comedic story like this? Maybe as a visiting dignitary or a scientist? Meanwhile, Paul Wesley's Kirk might not be in every episode, but if he pops up again, maybe it's in a fun one like this or the next. Without concrete trailer footage tied to this title, and there was no obvious Saylat shown, we're left to playful conjecture. I'll say this though, the episode might examine the idea of cycles and consequences, whether comedic, like a literal pet chasing its tail, causing slapstick scenarios, or serious, like being trapped in a loop of one's own making. The Vulcan element implies some Vulcan wisdom or culture is involved. Perhaps T'Pring or Cyborg, Spock's renegade half-brother, could feature. The Strange New World showrunners did tease Cyborg in season 1, and we haven't revisited him yet. If Cyborg were to return, a title like this could metaphorically fit his story. Cyborg's quest for emotion or God was a bit self-defeating in Star Trek V after all. One way or another, I anticipate a uniquely titled episode like this will have fans talking. A question for you as the audience. What do you think a Saylat eating its tail could symbolize? A time loop, a moral lesson, or just a funny image? Let me know your interpretations, because this one, it's wide open. Now, with episode 7, here's a title that lands like a challenge. What is Starfleet? It sounds like someone is literally questioning the nature, purpose, or ethics of Starfleet. This could be a very philosophical and introspective episode, possibly one of the more serious and message-driven hours of the season. It invites comparisons to episodes of past Trek, where ideals are put on trial, like TNG's Measure of a Man, questioning what the Federation stands for regarding androids' rights, or TNG's pilot with Q asking humanity to justify itself. So who's doing the asking? What is Starfleet and why? A few scenarios come to mind. The first one is a trial or a hearing. Perhaps Pike or another crew member is called to account for something. Maybe Pike's actions during the Gorn incident, if he disobeyed orders in episode 1, Starfleet might not let that slide. We could see a court-martial or inquiry where Starfleet's principles are debated. Imagine an Admiralty board grilling Pike. You defied orders for a handful of officers. Is that what Starfleet stands for? And Pike might deliver a powerful defense of Starfleet's core values. This could echo Picard's defense of humanity to Q, or Sisko's speeches in Deep Space Nine when Federation ideals were strained. Scenario 2, an outside perspective. The question might come from an alien or outsider who doesn't understand Starfleet. Possibly the Enterprise encounters a civilization or a single questioning individual who asks sincerely, what is Starfleet? Why do you do what you do? This could lead our crew to articulate their mission and ethics. It might be a first contact scenario where explaining Starfleet's peaceful exploration mandate is crucial. Or conversely, perhaps an alien accuses Starfleet of not living up to its ideals, pointing out times the Federation has acted like a military or violated the Prime Directive. That would really put Pike on the spot to justify or reconcile Starfleet's actions. Scenario number 3 is that it's an internal conflict. A crew member themselves might lose faith or be confused about Starfleet's direction. La'an, for example, has struggled with feeling that she belongs. Or, number 1, after her brush with Starfleet law last season, being arrested for being genetically modified, might ask Starfleet what it truly stands for, and if it would sideline loyal officers over such policies. The title phrasing is broad, but with an episode, someone like Uhura or Mbenga could be disillusioned and ask, why are we here? What is Starfleet really about? Prompting a soul-searching storyline. Given the official hint of a villain that will test our character's grit and resolve, this could be the episode where that villain's impact is felt philosophically. Maybe a charismatic antagonist, could be an alien leader or a rogue Starfleet officer, perhaps a familiar face like Captain Angel or Cyborg, challenges Pike and the crew with a critique of Starfleet. For instance, Captain Angel from Season 1 questions Spock's loyalty to Starfleet versus his own desires. A villain who perhaps orchestrates a scenario to make the crew doubt Starfleet could ask them, what is Starfleet? Is it really the beacon of virtue you think it is? And put them through some sort of test. The format could be something like the original series as The Cage or The Menagerie, where Pike was put on trial in a sense, or like the Q trials in The Next Generation. We might see montages or references to Starfleet's core tenets, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go, and so on. Speaking of that phrase, notice episode 10 is titled New Life and New Civilizations. It's possible episode 7 and episode 10 form thematic bookends. First ask the question, what is Starfleet? Then by the finale, answer it by demonstrating Starfleet's mission in action, seeking out new life and new civilizations. If so, episode 7 could be a darker or challenging moment when our heroes doubt themselves. And episode 10, the triumphant reaffirmation. That's a neat narrative arc across the back half of the season. This might also be an episode heavy on dialogue and character values. Don't expect big battles here, expect debates, speeches, maybe a moral dilemma. For example, Pike could be forced to choose between the letter of Starfleet's regulations and the spirit of Starfleet's ideals. Perhaps Starfleet Command orders something ethically grey, and Pike's crew must ask, is following this order truly what Starfleet is about? In Trek, the best drama often comes from those grey areas. And one more layer. The title phrasing reminds me of questions like, what is the Federation? Which in Trek have been debated. In the real world, it parallels asking, what is the military for? Or what is our organization's purpose? Given Strange New World's optimistic bent, I believe by the end of the episode, we'll get an inspiring answer. Possibly delivered by Pike or Spock or even an unexpected character, highlighting that Starfleet is about exploration, peace, and unity despite any flaws. They might directly reference the mission statement or have a rousing moment where someone says, this is Starfleet, we don't abandon our principles. Previously in lore, there was a moment in Deep Space Nine when Sisko said, Starfleet is not about individuals, it's about principles. I'm paraphrasing. And Picard famously said that Starfleet's mission is to seek out new life, not to destroy it. This episode could echo those sentiments. Given the placement as episode 7, it's likely a pivotal moment leading to the final act of the season. If any arcs, like that villain's schemes, are in play, they might peak here. Perhaps the crew's unity is tested and they emerge stronger, ready for the last stretch of adventures. I want to pose a question to you. If an alien asked you what is Starfleet, how would you answer? Now think about it, because this episode just might give us the definitive answer from our hero's perspective. Put your answer in the comments below. On to episode 8, 4.5 Vulcans. When humans play Vulcan. Several Enterprise crew members appear in Vulcan disguise in 4.5 Vulcans, hinting at comedic cultural caper. Now this title is a hoot and a half, or should I say 4.5. 4.5 Vulcans immediately sounds like a play on words, riffing on the sitcom 2.5 Men in structure. But in universe, it likely refers to a group of Vulcans with one person who's only half Vulcan. Now, who could that be? Our favourite science officer, Spock, of course, famously half Vulcan, half human. So, picture a scenario where Spock is somehow grouped with 4 Vulcans, making him the titular half. That would all but scream comedy episode, probably the comedic highlight of the latter half of the season. From what we've gathered, partly from the teaser trailer dropped 10 months ago, this episode is indeed expected to be light-hearted and funny. The teaser trailer shows multiple characters, including, it seems, some of our human crew in full Vulcan makeup and attire. It looks like several of our heroes go undercover as Vulcans. Now, the idea of humans trying to act perfectly logical and emotionless, I mean, that is potential for hilarity. And we've seen a taste of this in season 2 Charades, where Spock became fully human and had to pretend to be Vulcan at dinner. That resulted in comedic awkwardness. Now perhaps the tables are turned. Clearly from the teaser trailer, Una, Pike, La'an and Uhura have to pretend to be Vulcan for a mission. Why on Vulcan would the crew do this? Possibly a mission on Vulcan that requires them to blend in. Perhaps to Pring's family, who we met last season, or some Vulcan ceremony is involved. And a few of Pike's crew accompany Spock under disguise to avoid causing a scene. The mention of 4 Vulcans suggests maybe all 4 of our characters pass as Vulcan, plus Spock being the half. Now, as Patton Oswalt is indeed guest starring as shown in the trailer, he might be one of the Vulcans they have to interact with, perhaps playing a quirky Vulcan officiant or historian that the crew interacts with, adding comedic flavour. The title's humour also signals that while it will be funny, there's a thematic element. Spock's dual nature as half-human is front and centre. Perhaps through all the comedy of humans acting Vulcan, Spock might himself feel a bit more at ease. I mean, for once, he's not the only odd one out, since now everyone is kind of out of their element. Or conversely, maybe Spock has to confront not being fully Vulcan, as the teaser trailer suggested. We might also see Vulcan family drama or familiar faces. T'Pring could very likely appear here. This seems like a natural spot to bring her back. Her parents, especially her very proper mother, were comedic gold in charades. I wouldn't be surprised if they returned. Imagine the mother inspecting these Vulcans and almost sniffing out Pike's humanity. Tension and laughs ensue. Also, as some fans have speculated, this could be a chance to bring in Sarek, Spock's father, or other Vulcan elders. If Sarek cameos, how funny if he immediately senses something off about the disguised crew members. Sarek's eyebrow raise, anyone? And recall, Strange New Worlds hinted at Sybok, Spock's estranged half-brother in Season 1. Could he show up in a Vulcan-centric episode? It's not impossible Sybok's storyline might surface here. Maybe he's the reason they go to Vulcan in the first place, like he's caused some sort of trouble. Though Sybok is typically more an outlaw than welcome on Vulcan. Beyond comedy, I suspect this episode will also let us explore more Vulcan culture. Perhaps some nuance or tradition we haven't seen in Trek before. The title's whimsical nature doesn't preclude a bit of cultural insight. We might get to see a Vulcan ceremony or location. Imagine Strange New Worlds updated set for the Vulcan arena seen in Amok Time. I mean, that would be an absolute treat. In summary, expect fish out of water comedy with our crew posing as uber stoic Vulcans. It's an episode practically begging for a classic try not to blow your cover farce. And Spock, the one actual Vulcan, or half of one, it will be our lens to both the absurdity and the poignancy. He might feel proud of his friends for trying to understand his culture, or embarrassed by their flubs, or maybe a bit of both. There's definitely going to be a comedic angle to this story, so get ready to laugh and maybe learn that being Vulcan is harder than it looks. On to episode 9, Terrarium. Now, this penultimate episode has a short and evocative title. A terrarium is basically a sealed container housing like a small ecosystem, like a miniature garden or habitat under glass. Now, instantly, this suggests themes of containment, observation, and artificial environments. In a sci-fi context, it could mean the crew encounters an enclosed biosphere, perhaps a habitat where something or someone is kept and observed, akin to a zoo or preserve. This title gives me slight Twilight Zone vibes or classic sci-fi short stories where people find themselves in a world only to realize they're inside an alien child's fish tank, as one example. Now, one thought though, could this episode be where our mysterious new villain truly comes into play? And if there's an adversary who tests the crew, perhaps they capture or trap the Enterprise or its crew in a terrarium of sorts. There's precedence in Trek. The Talosians in the cage kept Captain Pike in a simulated habitat like a zoo specimen. Others, like the Preservers or various godlike aliens, have scooped up humans for observation. Maybe the season's villain is a powerful being. If it's Trelane, he'd fit, but we think he appears earlier, unless he returns for a finale arc. Or it could be a literal situation with a scientific bent. Perhaps the crew discovers a generational ship or space station that is a terrarium for endangered species or a colony in a bubble. Consider also, Strange New Worlds might want to do a story about the ethics of observation or interference. If the Enterprise finds a miniaturized civilization living in a terrarium-like environment, do they intervene or let it be? There's a classic Star Trek novel, The Forever People, with tiny aliens in a warp terrarium, but that's digressing slightly. Another angle, the psychological one. Terrarium could metaphorically refer to people feeling like they're in a fishbowl. Maybe the crew is being watched and tested as if they're specimens. This could tie back to Episode 7's Trial of Starfleet question. If a villainous entity wanted to understand what makes Starfleet tick, they might confine the crew in a controlled environment and observe their behavior under stress, like lab rats. That's a very outer limit style idea and also quite Trek too. Perhaps a godlike alien, not unlike the Metrons, who we mentioned earlier, or the Q Continuum, or even a rogue Starfleet AI like Control from Discovery is orchestrating something. Let's connect to trailer tidbits. We saw scary zombified Klingons and Mbenga fleeing. If that wasn't in episode 3, it could be here. Imagine the Enterprise itself becomes a terrarium due to an outbreak, sealed off due to a contagion, hence terrarium as in a quarantine bubble. The crew trying to cure a disease on board that turns people or Klingon guests into violent creatures fits the horror quota. Season 1's penultimate episode, All Those Who Wander, did horror with Gorn. Season 3 might do horror here with the virus. Terrarium might describe the ship under quarantine, a bottle episode of survival. However, doing 2 horror outbreak plots, if episode 3 was also that, might be repetitive. Unless episode 3 zombie was a quick incident and this is the full-blown outbreak. Alternatively, maybe Kenfory was pure adventure and Terrarium is the real horror episode. Another clue, by episode 9, shows often start setting up the finale. If episode 10 is going to be about new life and new civilizations, optimism and exploration, episode 9 might present a dark challenge that is overcome in 10. For example, the crew could be trapped in episode 9, then break free and go exploring anew in episode 10. Terrarium might see our crew at their lowest point, literally caged. Then the finale lets them out into the wild yonder of the galaxy again. Also, since episode 8 is comedic Vulcans, episode 9 likely swings serious again. Possibly a mystery or suspense-heavy story. Who built the terrarium? Are the crew the observers or the observed? The title is singular, one terrarium, which implies maybe the Enterprise crew themselves enter a contained habitat. Perhaps they find a Dyson sphere or a domed world, like in TNG's The Inner Light, had a probe that contained a whole simulated world for Picard. Not exactly a terrarium, but a similar concept of a preserved culture in a device. Here's a specific speculative plot. Enterprise discovers an abandoned alien science outpost. Inside is a terrarium housing a miniature ecosystem, maybe containing miniaturized people or a preserved slice of a planet about to go extinct. When the crew investigates, something causes them to get pulled into the terrarium. Think Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but in space, the crew gets miniaturized or trapped within the habitat. They then have to deal with perhaps the creatures or sentient beings inside and figure out how to escape back to normal size. I mean, that would be a visually wild episode. It's actually something Star Trek hasn't done in live action, although in the animated series there was an episode, the Terrarium incident, where the crew shrinks. Interestingly, similar root word to terrarium. So maybe the writers are homaging the animated series again, and they did so in season 2 with a few references. If they did shrink our crew and show them in a terrarium, that could be both suspenseful and a bit whimsical. But I'm more leaning that it'll be treated seriously as a life or death puzzle. By the end of Terrarium, I suspect the crew will break free or solve the problem, leading to a resolution that points them to the next adventure. Possibly they gain some profound insight about life in a bottle that influences their attitude in the finale. One more thematic notion. Terrariums are artificial environments maintained by someone. This could tie into the idea of playing God. Perhaps Dr. Mbenga or another scientist is faced with a moral decision, like, do we interfere with this terrarium world or not? If someone created a terrarium to save a species, does Starfleet help maintain it or release them? Ethical conundrums are plenty. And a challenge for you viewers, if you found a tiny civilization in a terrarium, would you let it be or try to help it escape? Terrarium might put that question to our crew, and by extension, to us. And then on to the final episode of the season 3 finale, New Life and New Civilizations. And the title could not be more on the nose: Star Trek. It is, of course, a direct reference to the iconic line from the original series intro, to seek out new life and new civilizations. The fact that this is the title implies a celebration of that core mission. After everything the crew has been through, Gorn battles, comedic detours, existential questions, the season, and possibly some story arcs, will conclude on a note of exploration and optimism. What might happen in this finale? I suspect this episode will bring the focus back on the Enterprise's true purpose: exploration and discovery. Perhaps after dealing with villains or internal issues, Pike finally gets the chance to fulfill the Starfleet mission statement without hindrance. We could see the crew actually discover a brand new life form or civilization that truly embodies the wonder of the unknown. One thought is that this episode could serve almost as a soft reboot to get us back on the track for exploration for season 4. For instance, maybe a lot of season 3's conflicts, the Gorn War, Klingon issues, villain tests, have kept the Enterprise near familiar territories. In the finale, they might get orders, or decide, to venture into unexplored space, symbolically renewing their mandate. The title might then reflect that literally encountering a new civilization as the first to contact it. It could also be an emotional wrap-up. For example, if some characters have been on personal journeys, Spock's identity, Pike's leadership test, La'an's trauma, that kind of thing, those might find a final resolution or a hopeful turning point here, tied into the theme of new life. Perhaps Chapel returns from her fellowship and that's a new life for her relationship with Spock. Or Una decides to start a new life path now that her legal issues are settled. Hard to say, but finales often pair the external plot with the internal character resolution. From a lore standpoint, new life and new civilizations could involve an awe-inspiring cosmic phenomenon or a first contact scenario of significance. Maybe the Enterprise makes contact with a species that is truly different, something that expands their horizons. Think of episodes like The Next Generation's encounter at Farpoint, meeting a spaceborne jellyfish entity, literally new life, or Voyager's encounters with weird life forms in the Delta Quadrant. Strange New Worlds might give us its own unique twist. Perhaps the new life is not humanoid at all, but something abstract like a sentient nebula or a living star. I mean, strange new worlds indeed. The mention of new civilizations, plural, is interesting. Could they stumble upon a whole alliance of new species? Or maybe it's a phrase to denote the overall spirit rather than literally multiple civilizations. Another possibility, the finale could loop back to something introduced earlier. If that mysterious villain is still in play by this point, maybe defeating or overcoming that villain leads to the discovery of new life. For instance, if the villain was trying to stop humans from exploring, just hypothesizing, their defeat might clear the path to a wonderful discovery. The official blurb said, "New life and civilizations await, including a villain that will test our characters." That almost suggests once the test is passed, the reward is new life and civilizations. Perhaps in this finale, the crew passes the test, proving Starfleet's values are genuine, perhaps referencing episode 7's question. And as a result, the door to new life and new civilizations opens, metaphorically or literally. I also wouldn't be surprised if James T. Kirk appears in the finale. Paul Wesley's been around this season intermittently. Maybe as a tease of things to come or just involvement in a grand mission, Kirk could join Pike on a big first contact, which might poetically foreshadow Kirk eventually taking the center seat and continuing that mission. We might also get some sweet nods. Perhaps Pike or Spock echoes the famous line in dialogue, e.g., "Captain's log, we are about to seek out new life and new civilizations, which is why we're out here in the first place." That would give Trekkies chills. The hopeful tone is key. Strange New Worlds will want to leave us exhilarated and optimistic going into hiatus. Filming for season 4 is already underway, so they may plant seeds for next adventures too. Maybe a cliffhanger, but likely more a teaser than a dire one, since they did the whole cliffhanger thing last time. In terms of visual spectacle, a season finale often has some wow factor. We could see a gorgeous new world realized with modern visual effects, something truly strange and new. Possibly the Enterprise travels outside the galaxy or to a new quadrant. Or they encounter an advanced being that imparts some wisdom, like how season 1 finale had the time travel with future Pike imparting wisdom, but here it could be an alien doing so. Emotionally, expect some characters to have closure on arcs. Spock might reconcile some of his romantic issues or accept his dual nature more fully. Maybe after seeing an alien species that's also dual-natured. That'd be a neat parallel. Pike might finally let go of some guilt or burden after saving his crew, and assuming he's struggled post-Gorn stuff. Most importantly, the finale should reassert that spirit of adventure. Season 3's journey will likely conclude with the crew looking out on a starfield, eager for what's next, reaffirming why we, and they, love Starfleet. As Strange New Worlds is fundamentally an optimistic show, I predict a rousing speech or moment where someone, Pike is a good bad, essentially says, "This is why we're here. This is Starfleet." Perhaps linking back to episode 7 question. He might answer it by example, finding new life and new civilizations and treating them with respect and wonder. And that wraps up the episode by episode speculations. Oh, it's been a fun ride imagining all of this, but now let's zoom out for the conclusion and see how these pieces might form a bigger picture of season three. Now, season three of Strange New Worlds is shaping up to be a thrilling roller coaster of tones and themes, from nail-biting showdowns with the Gorn to laugh-out-loud Vulcan hijinks, from existential questions about Starfleet's soul to mind-bending time experiments and nostalgic holodeck capers. This season is really going to say, why not do it all? And amazingly, it looks like it's going to work. Star Trek has always been about balancing the human and the alien, the dramatic and the humorous, and Strange New Worlds is carrying that torch proudly. If our speculation holds true, the season will alternate between making us grip our seats in episodes 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and making us smile or even outright laugh in episodes 2, 4, 6, and 8. Finally, landing on an inspiring finale that reminds us why we love exploring strange new worlds in the first place. There's a method to this madness. By giving us emotional breaths between intense stories, the show keeps us engaged and invested. One week we might be wiping away a tear or shuddering at a horror scene. The next we're grinning at Spock's deadpan reaction to absurdity. Some emerging themes across the season are resilience and identity. Pike's crew proving their mettle under a villain's test. Spock navigating his dual heritage. Number One and La'an finding their place. And a celebration of Starfleet's core values. I suspect by the end, after being tested by conflict and perhaps doubt, the crew will reaffirm their commitment to Starfleet's mission to seek out that new life and new civilizations with open hearts and minds. We also can't overlook the fan service and lore building. The likely appearance of Trelane, I mean, what a treat for the original series fans. The inclusion of Klingons and perhaps Vulcan family cameos. And of course, our pals Kirk and Scotty slowly integrated into the ensemble, hinting at the Enterprise's future. These are done not just for nostalgia, but to enrich the story and show pivotal moments in these characters' lives. Season 3 seems to be bridging the old and the new, making full use of modern Trek's freedom to experiment with genre, whilst tipping the hats to the classic episodes that started it all. Overall, the tone will remain hopeful and character-centric. Yes, we'll get action and spectacle with Gorn battles, space zombies and explosions, no doubt about that. But Strange New World's secret sauce is how much we care about this crew's relationships. Whether it's Pike's mentorship, Spock and Chapel's star-crossed feelings, or the camaraderie that leads our bridge crew to impersonate Vulcans for each other's sake. It's the family vibe that holds everything together. Expect season 3 to put that family under strain at times, but ultimately to strengthen those bonds. By the final credits of episode 10, I'm betting we'll feel thoroughly satisfied. Major plot threads tied up, characters grown, and a big optimistic push into the off-season. They'll likely leave us with a tease, maybe a surprise twist or a season 4 hint. Could be anything from a famous villain shadow to a mission directive like setting course for the Gamma Quadrant or who knows what. But nothing too cruel. Not after season 2's cliffhanger. I think season 3 might opt for a more uplifting closure. Now, as we gear up for these adventures, I have another question for you. Which episode title intrigues you the most, and what do you think it means? Are you excited for the goofy promise of 4.5 Vulcans, or perhaps the mysterious dread of Terrarium? Do you foresee heartbreak in Wedding Bell Blues, or triumph in new life and new civilizations? Let's get that discussion going in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories and what you're most looking forward to. And with that, hailing frequencies are nearly closed for today. We've navigated the knowns and unknowns of Strange New World Season 3's titles And if even half of these speculations pan out, we're in for an unforgettable season. I, for one, cannot wait to see Captain Pike and crew back in action, surprising us each week with something new, or should I say, strange. If you enjoyed this deep dive and it stoked your excitement, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new here, or you just haven't yet, subscribe to Hailing Frequencies so you won't miss our episode reviews and future Star Trek breakdowns. We have a lot to talk about as these episodes are going to start rolling out. Lastly, I want to invite you, drop a comment with your wildest theory for Season 3. Star Trek is all about imagination and community, so let's speculate together. Who knows, maybe one of your ideas will nail it and we'll feature it in a future video. Until next time, this is Hailing Frequencies and Stu Jackson signing off. Stay curious, stay hopeful, and as always, live long and prosper.